In Chapter 5.4 of Hunter the Parenting, the Arcanum calls in the support of the Coalition after a werewolf is identified as an infiltrator and escapes with Marcus. While the Coalition is a multinational alliance of secret agencies that are in the know, their presence in Norfolk County is cemented by alliances with less powerful factions, which we also get to meet. The Coalition factions we see are the Newburgh Group and the Society of St. Leopold, while the inferior factions are the G. Contoret and the East Anglican Union. We are already introduced to the Arcanum, which falls into the category of inferior faction, and the importance of Granddad's Foodstuff PMC is left intentionally ambiguous. As they all make increasingly ridiculous demands, we gain insight into their role in the world of darkness as organized monster hunting factions. Before I say my piece, I want to speak positively. The video itself has wonderful art, incredible voice acting, and is by itself well written, delivering the tension required to make an hour of pure negotiations compelling while not compromising on the humor. It's just that this video, this whole series, leans on something complicated, which would be the World of Darkness. When a video comes out, people talk about the World of Darkness, or at least skim the articles on the White Wolf Wiki, as I have noticed whenever I see what pages are trending after an episode is released. It's pleasant to see that there is a willingness to learn. However, Hunter the Parenting also sets out to educate its viewers on the World of Darkness. Chapter 5.4 is the video all about orgs, a concept introduced in the 5th edition of Hunter the Reckoning, which are presented as somewhere between neutral rivals to outright adversaries. The core issue, as presented in the core rulebook, is that orgs hunt for their own ends rather than to oppose monsters. Not that the hunters a player can create, as presented in the core rulebook, can't hunt for their own ends, such as satisfying curiosity, greed, or envy, but that is simply a matter of the writers tripping over themselves because the core rulebook kind of sucks. Anyways, 5.4 kind of settles on identifying the difference between independent cells and orgs, as orgs being too detached from the realities of fighting monsters to offer proper aid. They get caught up in their dogma, rules of engagement, or petty grievances to act, and while hunters are not immune from such issues, orgs experience them at a systemic level. In my own writings, which are currently not available, I have described the key issues with orgs as being that they generally have no reason to compromise on their interests, benefit from the status quo that hunters threaten, and have no conscience. The role of orgs in 5th edition Hunter the Reckoning is why Hunter the Parenting features them, and in 5th edition, orgs are split into 5 types which mirror the 5 creeds for Hunter characters. Academic orgs hoard knowledge, government orgs place order and authority above action, corporate orgs are constricted by their profit motives, religious orgs are constricted by their faith, and vigilante orgs ride at the tide of being accountable to no one. That last type is a little complicated, but I'll unpack it later. The orgs we see in Chapter 5.4 represent each of the 5 types presented in 5th edition Hunter. The Newburgh Group is a government org, G. Contoret is presented as an academic org, the PMC is a corporate org, the Society of St. Leopold is a religious org, and the East Anglican Union is presented as a vigilante org. I have to say that what these factions offer to the story itself, the tension and entertainment, is good, but I find myself having an issue with all but one of the orgs presented because of fidelity to the source material. This is sort of split into 2 complaints where I either think that the faction is not a good example of what one should expect from official books, or I don't think the faction is a good example for the archetype of org they're meant to represent. Also, this gives me an avenue to explain more World of Darkness stuff, which is always my pleasure. I will get through my complaints by taking the orgs one at a time, with the exception of Granddad's Foodstuff PMC, which I have opinions on but not really issues with, and I refuse to badmouth Blair. I want to start with the Newburgh Group, as their presentation here is kind of bonkers. The Newburgh Group is to the United Kingdom what First Light is to the United States. It is the directing body that coordinates operations and centralizes relevant intelligence for the factions that answer to it, which would be the Intelligence-Centric Joint Threat Response Group, or JTRG, and the Combat-Centric SO-13. I will firstly acknowledge that the Newberg Group as presented in the official books did not exist until 2009, when the Methuselah Mithras slipped Sir Simon Newberg a dossier of blank body targets. Newberg was at the head of the predecessor group for the JTRG, and he assembled his little cabal of fellow government elites and contacts within the local acronym to create the Newberg Group. It is the government org that exploits the mass surveillance of the United Kingdom for its ruthless purges of blank bodies. It has also been suffering from the success of 2012's Operation Antigen, which wiped out London's blank body population so badly that the JTRG has been regularly trying to cover up any signs that there might still be vampires in the city, just to save face with their allies in the coalition. Chapter 5.4 shows the Newberg Group with their mass surveillance reflected in their specific interest in vampires, their obsession with the hunter data, along with its existence in the first place, and Bilgewater's insistence that the D family are criminals. It also does acknowledge that the Newberg Group is not supposed to officially exist yet, which sounds more like lampshading than narratively significant. The Joint Threat Research Intelligence Group, the predecessor to the JTRG, already existed and did much of what the Newberg Group does now, so using them would have kept things more accurate. I also find it questionable that they leave with the other orgs when Pentex's PMC withdraws, because the Newberg Group has the same authority as the Society of St. Leopold, if not significantly more. If there is one faction of the 6 that we see that doesn't need Pentex's support, it's the one made of England's elite that are sitting on the wealth of industrialism and imperialism, which, contrary to some belief, did not need Pentex's help to flourish. I also have to mention this one thing because it is relevant to every org that plays with the law. There is no license to hunt, and unsanctioned hunting is not a crime, because a ton of what government orgs do is also highly illegal. The activities around a hunt can be protected by legalese, while still being kept out of courts or committees through stuff like alternative dispute resolution clauses. But one shouldn't expect for government orgs to enter formal agreements with hunters because they have no reason to treat them as equals. When Bilgewell tries to bind the D family by a contract, it misses a deeply grim and funny reality of government orgs, because do you want to know what they typically do to hunters who don't comply with them?
Al-Qaeda! Al-Qaeda!
Because what is an NDA and the legal action it implies supposed to do in this kind of conspiracy, where only as many people know of it as are needed to uphold it? I guess it can be like when rapists coerce people who don't know any better into signing NDAs, but the D family seem to know better. I am harping on this thing a bit because I think this display of authority is an inaccurate representation of how government orgs operate. There is no type of org that would have an easier time getting away with burying hunters in a shallow grave, or shipping them off to places where questions are asked with a rag and a bucket of water.
I never said I was going to send you to Guantanamo.
I'm going to send you to Jerusalem.
Now, of course, I would never send him to Jerusalem. We don't do that.
We send him to
Way worse places than Jerusalem.
The Newberg Group just comes off more like a corporate org than a government org that actually understands how much power they wield and aren't afraid to use it. Double-crossing the Newberg Group would have been way more dangerous than betraying the Society of St. Leopold, and the Newberg Group is presented as a milder group between the two. A dedicated second-party partner to the coalition since the early days of the conspiracy, G. Contoret's parent organization specialized in economic espionage, but relied on occult powers to steal secrets. G. Contoret was founded by members of the Arcanum that had reconstructed the archives of the defunct World War II-era T. Contoret occult study group through black glass scrying circles. Although this is unknown to their allies, G. Contoret believes their legacy archives point to a mystical weakness in the blank body condition that may allow them to develop a treatment for vampirism. To this end, they've begun experimenting on captured sin bloods, and have had some success in reducing the potency of the curse in their blood. That was a slightly abridged description of G. Contoret, ripped from Vampire the Masquerade's Second Inquisition book, but it is also literally everything you need to know. Though it gets the spotlight, if you can even call it that, in a book that heavily focuses on how governments get involved in hunting vampires, G. Contoret is actually a lot closer to an academic work much like the Arcanum. I want these guys to follow up the Newberg group because I think they're presented fine with their callous pursuit of knowledge. My attention here is more tangential and analytical rather than critical, focusing on the mention of Project Twilight. Project Twilight was a conspiracy between government personnel in the United States who were aware of supernatural and sought to deal with it. The NSA, FBI, DEA, CIA, DoD, and even the CDC all dipped their toes into the thing, mostly to shuffle assets and intelligence as needed. After 9/11, investigating the American people without questioning in the name of counterterrorism required far less secrecy. First Light, founded in 2002, offered enough formal confidentiality to keep Congress from looking too deep into it, to the point that no one in Congress really knows that it exists, while still being able to mobilize far more effectively against supernatural threats. Project Twilight could have never authorized something like a drone strike, a symbol of what Team of Navy SEALs, or hire mercenary hunters with the efficiency that First Light now does, which is why Project Twilight totally went under. This came at the cost of submitting to the bureaucracy of the Coalition, and honing in on the blank body threat as their inherent capabilities are far more insidious than any other known supernatural. Given how much of what the Coalition does to undermine official hierarchies, Project Twilight managed to live on in its original state as a rogue conspiracy within a rogue conspiracy. They now use the Coalition's connections to operate far beyond the United States, embedding themselves in institutions ranging from the Ministry of State Security in China to Interpol, in order to persecute all supernaturals and keep their influence far away from any government. This overview is pulled from the Project Twilight book and the Apostates book for Hunt of the Reckoning 5th edition, which contains the most committed depiction of Project Twilight for this current edition. It has also previously been used as a collective term for all government orgs in the United States, such as in the Camarilla Sourcebook for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, though it seems that this usage of the name Project Twilight has been abandoned, which is good, because it was a useless term back then and the old Camarilla book kinda sucks. Now, with all of that said, what the hell is Charles talking about when he mentions Project Twilight? I don't pose that question as a matter of mystery, but complexity between editions. Does Charles have contacts with hunters of the United States government, or with a bunch of agents who are willing to hunt without First Light's express approval? I think it's the latter, because Charles described Project Twilight as being baked into the Coalition rather than being part of it. I sort of question why they're mentioned at all, but I think it's worth untangling Project Twilight in case it ever becomes relevant again. My complaint here is that between the Inquisition book for the classic World of Darkness, both Hunters Hunted books, and all related 5th edition books, I have not found anything regarding Society of St. Leopold conscripting independent hunters. In fact, I have found some things that are not in support of this. The Society regularly works with secular organizations, such as its partners in the Coalition, with whom they have mutual respect, though not so much mutual trust. The Society also recognizes the Dignitas Humanae, or the Declaration on Religious Freedom, and even the Unitatis Redintegratio, or the Restoration of Unity. They are ostensibly servants of the Vatican, but they are not Catholic supremacists. They also cannot coerce people into the Catholic Church, let alone the Society of St. Leopold, as they see the call to hunt as far too sacred for liberal recruitment. With all of that said, the Society doesn't turn down alliances with independent hunters on the grounds of them being independent. They are not inherently adversarial, even after becoming part of the Coalition. Genuine friends, unknowing cannon fodder, blackmailed pawns, they all have a place within the Society's network, and not among the Society itself. The agreements that forge these alliances are also a hell of a lot more clean than turning random, unqualified, faceless suckers into inquisitors or even novitiates. Even after joining the coalition, this hasn't really changed, and it's not like everyone else in the coalition isn't doing the same thing. Yes, this does mean that some seemingly independent hunter cells may actually be funded by feds, or the Catholic Church. I think the East Anglican Union is kinda neat as a combination of the Union from Hunter the Vigil, with a lot of clear references to that game, and the ideas laid out for vigilante orgs in 5th edition that I can kind of see them as their own thing. However, I just think that the EAU isn't a good example of a vigilante org. Just listening to what they say, they have about as much oversight as most independent hunters already do, which is to say none. But for the Union, they avoid accountability by giving their information to the Coalition, which a lot of hunters already do, though not the Coalition specifically, it can be other orgs, and it's sort of expected for players to do so. The cost of membership is various arbitrary payments, attending regular patrols, and running independent hunts by an authority figure of the Union. Also, no pub crawls without inviting the lads. Honestly, it sounds like the Union is interested in putting leashes on their own members to drain them of money under some excuse of doing everyone a favor, which just describes corporate orgs in the abstract. The only difference is that the hunters of the Union are suckers, while corporate orgs also make their customers into suckers. But I'm not really surprised that this is how a vigilante org was depicted, because the 5th edition Hunter the Reckoning core rulebook is kind of bad, and doesn't do a good job painting the picture of what a vigilante org is compared to a rival cell. Fortunately, the core rulebook did have the Nails of Christ, a decentralized paramilitary group that has submitted to paranoid xenophobia regarding supernatural foreign invaders, which would have made them a vigilante org, but the esoteric Christian cult thing they have going on is what made them a religious org. Later on, we did get proper vigilante orgs, such as the Real Cognistas, which are united by collective reverence for an anonymous poster that has passed along real information regarding the unnatural mixed in with a lot of nonsense, while also cultivating anti-government paranoia that has pushed his followers to increasingly isolate themselves from the world. The Red Eyes Community Watch, which is a grassroots society of hunters that have extensively mingled with the supernatural to keep their operations afloat, while neglecting their less established chapters. The Public Disorder Intelligence Union, which is a loose alliance of police officers across the United States that exchange information harvested from mass surveillance operations, occasionally pursuing monsters, but more often exploiting their findings to use as blackmail while subjugating independent hunters. And the Talbot Club, which is a secret society of ultra-wealthy businessmen that compete with monsters for control over the criminal underworld, while also repeatedly stabbing each other in the back because they are unsurprisingly very competitive. Vigilante procedures at their worst result in stuff like conspiratorial thinking, mob justice, witch hunts, and lynchings. Alternatively, it's a free-for-all with the guise of an organization, with far too little accountability or ethics to be effective. It's stuff like the Klan or QAnon if you removed the religious elements while making the racism optional and the political/ethical elements mandatory. So yeah, I don't think the EAU is out of the discussion of being a vigilante org, but I don't think it's a particularly good example of one for understanding the world of Hunter, nor do they really convey the point of vigilante orgs as emphasizing the problems with their lack of accountability or ethics. As I wrap things up, I should mention again that basically none of what I said is to indict Chapter 5.4 as its own thing. But with videos like that, or the werewolf video, or the ghoul video, there is some presumption that it is trying to not just be entertaining, but insightful. I think Chapter 5.4 is plenty entertaining, but not insightful for the World of Darkness, nor Hunter the Reckoning. I don't think that Hunter the Parenting needs to spell out that it is entertainment before anything else. and that does influence how it presents the world of darkness, which then influences how people talk about the world of darkness. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes I go to the HTP subreddit to torture myself with some of the takes I see there, but I tell myself that it's to motivate the creation of my own World of Darkness videos. And that concludes this World of Darkness video, because I'm really just using Hunter the Parenting to talk about the setting it's based in. I also wanted to get something out since I'm still working on that big Werewolf the Apocalypse video, which is definitely going to be well over 2 hours long, but I at least have 2 hours of the voiceover and an hour of recording done. So I'm sure that video will come out before the actual apocalypse comes around. Until then, you can subscribe to this channel for more nonsense on the spooky to strange spectrum, or follow my Blue Sky for irregular updates on videos, unrelated projects, and misadventures. There is also my 5th edition Hunter the Reckoning supplement, Additional Player Options, which is on Storyteller's Vault, and I have an affiliate link for it in the description. I have been Ignacio Vitalis, thank you for watching, and may the night treat you right. I'm still like really surprised that the World of Darkness introduction video on the Alpha Pusa channel suggests playing Bloodlines first as like a person's initiation into the World of Darkness. You know, you can just read the books, right? You don't have to play the game. It might nullify like half the book, but you don't have to pay for it. You can just look up like Vampire the Masquerade PDF and you'll like boom. You'll find the book. You'll find it 1st edition, revised, 20th anniversary, 5th edition. I got them all. The PDFs just they're free to take online. I got like 100 of them on my computer.